Well, good morning, Thrive. How are you doing today? I am Dr. Tom, and I sound like Barry White this morning, so you'll have to forgive the sexy Barry White voice, but I've been struggling with a little bit of a hacking up of the lung, I guess. Maybe you heard me up here hacking up a lung, and it's not pretty. I'm going to refrain from hacking in the microphone, though. I promise. I got through last time without doing it, and I will do it again today. Yeah, and my brain is also like all funky. Does anyone's brain get funky when you're sick? Like you can't think straight? Yes. Well, I want to wrap up our Do Good series. We're on number 4, Do Good, and we're going to talk about how to share the gospel through the act of kindness. One of my favorite Christians of all of history was St. Francis of Assisi, and he said, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. Isn't that cool? Like, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. Because kindness actually communicates a whole lot about who God is and what God is like. Now, when I think of sharing my faith or witnessing or evangelizing or whatever other religious kind of words you want to put on this thing, but sharing my faith, I get a picture in my head of these folks around where I live. They like to stand on the corner with these signs and bullhorns, and they yell at the cars as they go by. Has anyone encountered this form of witness or evangelism or anything like that? It's around my house, and they're out there about once a week, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't think that's actually working. Maybe it's just me, but I don't see your church getting very big or, masses starting to come in through the doors and be like, wow, just didn't really know how much of a loser I was until you told me. Thank you. This is amazing. It's like that form of witness, evangelism, sharing our faith, I don't really see it working. But when I think of this idea of evangelism or sharing our faith or witnessing, that is immediately where my mind goes. Like this pushy, presumptuous, like in-your-face coercive manipulation, right, of your brain to get you to agree that I'm right so that you'll come to where I go and do what I do and behave and dress like me and act like me and think like me and all those other things. Like there's this concept of sharing our faith that I shy away from it. And then I think, well, maybe I need to share my faith more. Okay, I need to have my bullet points and my doctrinal points and my whatever all is sound, and I need to be able to... No. St. Francis of Assisi says to share the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. And I love that because, I do have some words. I can figure out some words to share, but I know that I can be kind. I know that I can share my faith through my kindness. Now, it wasn't always this way. It wasn't, I used to be that really excited religious person, right? Like when I first came to faith as a teenager, Jason, our lead pastor, who was actually in Venture Church over in Highland speaking this morning, he was my youth pastor, and he kind of brought me back into the faith. But I became so stinking excited about this faith, and we were in such a very conservative church that I started to conform to everything that I should. I was wearing what I should wear. I was saying what I should say. I was believing what I should believe. And then, importantly, I was doing the things that I should do. So every week I would go into their library, and I would take the tracts off the track thing. I don't know what it was called. It was the tract thing, I think. Do you remember tracts? Their tracts are basically these folded pieces of paper that have all the information needed for people to understand that they need to become Christian, that they need to convert. So these tracts, they help people understand how to convert to the faith or whatever. So I'd take all these tracts, and then I would gather the youth ministry, and we would go down to downtown Plymouth, and we would start passing out tracts to all the people on the street. And we would do this day after day, or weekend after weekend. And one Sunday, the pastor of the church, he got up. He's behind this wood pulpit that was like this big, right? And he was a short guy, so you can only see his head. It was a really interesting effect. And then he had a microphone, so you could really only see his eyes. But he said, our teenagers have been sharing their faith. We're all out of tracts. We need more money to go buy tracts. And everyone's applauding. And I thought, yeah, I am pretty cool, aren't I? because that was me. I did that. Yes, it was amazing. So I was really excited, and I was sharing faith, and just to kind of illustrate how excited I was about my faith. I was in youth group on Wednesday nights because Fridays we're in Plymouth and Sundays we're in church, and Wednesday we're in youth group. And Jason was leading worship, and I would stand front row, and my hands are up like, yeah, praising Jesus is cool. And then I had a friend next to me. His name was Mike, and he was worshiping Jesus. And I kind of look over at Mike, I was like, his hands are a little higher than mine, and I lift mine a little higher. I was like, you're not going to outdo me in worship, yo. And he's worshiping, and then he peeks over me, he's like, lifts it a little higher. And then I'm over here, and I was like, wait a second. I got an edge on this guy. I'm 6'5", right? Like, boom, I'm going all the way. Yeah, I'm going all the way. And he looks at me. No joke, the dude stands on his chair. Hands are up like this, standing on his chair. And I'm like, that's cheating. You're so cheating. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't be outdone. I can't be outdone. What can I do? Yes! I win. I worship better than you. So I was like leading the holiness parade at my youth group. I was like the guy. I was like, I had this down. It was amazing. People were like, man, that Tom, he knows how to do everything. He's great. And one day, Anti walks in. And you're probably thinking, what in the world is Anti? It's not a what, it's a who, because Anti was this kid. He was kind of tall, a little pudgy, and very red. Like his face was red all the time. And his hair was kind of that orangey red. Like it was orange, but not dyed orange. It was naturally orange. I was like, wow, that's a lot of orange. And then he wore this orange leather jacket. So it was naturally orange too. It was like orange, orange, orange. I'm like, that's a lot of orange, yo. And he turns around to put something on his chair, and on the back of his leather coat was duct tape, and he had spelled out the word anti. And I thought, what does that mean? I don't know what anti is. Does that mean you're anti-something or anti-everything except anti? You can't be anti-anti because then you'd be pro. So are you anti-pro or are you pro-anti? Because now I'm really confused about what exactly anti means. It turns out he was pretty much anti-everything, mad at life, and he just stood in the back like this, arms folded and scowling the whole time. And I was like, not in my youth group, you don't do that. We praise Jesus here, arms up. Come on. And he was not getting going with this. It was just not working, and he just stood in the back and scowled. And then when we're kind of walking around afterwards, and Anti is walking around me, and I'm like, this guy has just got bad vibes, ruining my holiness parade here at church. And he actually was like cussing. I was like, not in my church, you don't. Mm-mm. I was going to leave, and I walk out on the parking lot, and he's smoking in my church parking lot. Not in my church parking lot, you don't? No, I don't think so. You ain't gonna pee all over my holiness parade here because I got this good, and you're ruining it with your anti. I did not like this guy, as you can tell. So one day, I decided to evangelize him. It's like, I'm set now. I got my sights on this anti guy, and I'm gonna make him anti-Satan. Yeah. That's what we're going to do. Pro-Jesus. We're going to make him a believer. So before social media, it was actually like a thing. This is before the Facebook, right? We had this thing called email. You remember email? A couple of people remember the email, right? Email. Now, if you saw something on Facebook, you're like, that's cool. Hit like or hit share, and you can share it with the world that way. We didn't have that back then. We had the email, and with the email, there was this button called forward. Now, perhaps your grandmother still forwards you articles every now and then because she hasn't found the Facebook yet. But pretty soon she will, and you'll get, the forwards from the Facebook instead of the email. But anyways, I found a forward coming to me from my email, and here it was like this letter written in like the form of like Satan is writing this letter to all the people who follow him without realizing it. And he's totally mocking them and making fun of them. And it's just this really rude, nasty, harsh letter. And I was like, print. Anti's going to convert when he reads that. Like, everybody's going to convert when they read that. So I printed it, and I folded it up, put it in my pocket, went to youth group. And at youth group, Anti had his jacket off. It's like, oh, is he still Anti? I don't know. Anyways, he hung it up in the ping pong room, and he walks out, and I'm playing ping pong, right? So I just kind of slip it out of my pocket, and I was like, bam, slip. It was so smooth, yo. It was so smooth. Slipped it right into his coat pocket and came back for the return, and I won ping pong. Maybe, I don't remember, but it sounded good. So there it was, Anti's jacket, deposited information in Anti's jacket. And he comes back in, puts his coat on, walks in. I'm like, when he gets home and reads that, next week he's going to be a changed person. He's going to be saved. He's going to be with me in the front row, and we're going to be doing the battle of the hands thing again. It's going to be great. Didn't happen that way. This big explosion of anger came out of the other room, and like the wind came in the door, and he said, "Who put this in my pocket?" Whoa. I think I angered Anti. He's pretty ticked off. And he went around to every single person, and his red face, like I thought it was red before, but it was bright red. And he's like in everyone's face, "Did you put this in my jacket? Did you put this in my jacket pocket?" And he gets to me, and like the finger's right here, and he says, "Did you put this in my jacket pocket?" Nope. Wasn't me. Don't know who did it. Don't know who did it. Sorry, sir. Went away. I felt kind of bad there, but I was like, I don't want to die right now. So I'm leaving youth group, walk out, and I parked under a street light, one of the orange ones, and there's Anti standing under the street light, leaned against my car. I thought he was orange before the street light, but man, that street light was like, this guy is now flaming beacon of orange standing on my car. I can't get to my car, and I walked up to him, and he said, "I know it was you. Somebody saw you put it in there. And then they told me, and you lied to me about it." And I said, "Yeah, I put it in there, and I lied about it. Yep." And then he said this phrase, and it's haunted me ever since. He said, "I am never coming back here again." And I never saw him again. See, I had this concept that light should be like shining in people's faces and being like, "See, can you see? Can you see this? You need to convert, you need to change." And I thought light actually could push someone. But these lights up here, as bright as they are, I don't feel a push from the light. Has anyone ever been pushed over by light waves? It doesn't happen. Light doesn't push or pull. A light draws and attracts and illuminates. Now, Jesus says that we are the light of the world. In Matthew 5, he says, "We're the light of the world, and a city on a hill cannot be hidden." See, he knew this city on a hill imagery, because back in those days, if you're wandering around at night without a light, which you didn't have a flashlight back then, you may have a candle or something, but it was dangerous. It was dark, and you couldn't see. Has anyone here ever turned your flashlight off in the middle of the woods at nighttime? You can't see anything. It's so dark. But in the distance, you can see the light of a house, right? You're like, okay, over there is that road. I know that. Over here. And you can use the lights of people's houses to kind of guide you at night if you're ever lost and in the dark. And that's what people would do back in these days, is when they're wandering, if they couldn't make it to where they were going to be by nightfall, they knew at least that the city lights would be lit in the windows and they could find their way there, because cities were placed on higher places to draw people there when they're wandering in the dark. That's what Jesus says his people are to be like. Not pushers, coercers, manipulators, or even convincers. But he calls us light that attracts, that draws, that illuminates people who are wandering. So what is God trying to do then? The name of this message is There Is No Them, right? I called anti a them and I'm an us. We have this us-them mentality going on. There's us and there's them. And the us need to reach out to the them and make them an us. But really that creates this, I'm better than you. And I'm trying to get you to come here where I am. And that's not how we can communicate the gospel effectively. It doesn't work when it comes from an us versus them standpoint. So what is God trying to do with all this? One of my heroes, Richard Foster, wrote this. He says, this is the goal of God in history. You could take a picture of this quote because you're going to have to think about it for a week. But God brings together an all-inclusive community of loving persons with himself at the center of that community as its prime sustainer and most glorious inhabitant. That's what the church is. And that's what God is building here, now, today, starting with us, starting with a group of people that are cities on a hill, that are lights in dark places, and a group of all-inclusive, loving community that can draw the wandering out of the darkness and into places of safety. We're a city on a hill. There's a story that communicates this really well, and it's out of Luke 16. And I would have read Luke 16 far differently 20 years ago than I do today. 20 years ago, I would have read this story and said, now, I think Jesus is creating two categories of kinds of people, those who get it and those who don't. Those who get it get to go to a nice place, and those who don't get to go to a bad place. This is the story of Lazarus and the rich man. And if you've been in church and you've heard sermons for any amount of time, there's a good chance you've heard this story, Lazarus and the rich man. Let me give you a quick synopsis. There's a rich man, and there's this poor man named Lazarus. And the rich man has Lazarus laying at his gates. And Lazarus has these sores on his body, and dogs come and lick him. And he wants to have the scraps from the rich man's table. And then one day they die. And the rich man ends up in this place of torment, and he doesn't like it. And the poor man, Lazarus, winds up at this place called Abraham's bosom. Apparently, it's where you go to nuzzle Father Abraham's beard. I'm not sure exactly what they were thinking with that term, but there it is. And he gets to go to a place where it's kind of like nice and refreshing. And the rich man says, send Lazarus over here with some water because I'm thirsty and it's hot here. And Abraham's like, sorry, can't do that. And then he says, well, tell Lazarus to go warn my brothers. I have 5 brothers. Tell them to go warn my brothers so that they don't end up in the same place that I am in. And Abraham again says, sorry, he can't do that. Besides, they have Moses and the prophets. They can read Moses and the prophets. So this story is actually how we get the Christmas carol. Remember the story of the Christmas carol and the 3 spirits of Christmas that come, past, present, and future? Because Charles Dickens read this story and he says, but what if someone were able to do that? And he let his imagination go, and we have the story of Ebenezer Scrooge. He was inspired by this very thing. But what if Jesus is not trying to communicate the nature of the afterlife? Because I thought that that's what this was trying to communicate to us. I thought that Jesus is teaching us there's 2 places that you can go when you die, and if you're a good person, you go on to this place. If you're a bad person, you go on to this place. And he's actually not trying to communicate the afterlife at all. He's using imagery from the day, Hebrew theology of the day, and he's trying to communicate a point. And the point he's trying to communicate is not where you go when you die. But I used to make this all about that, and I missed the broad point. There's a couple of clues in here because Jesus loves to tell stories. They're called parables, stories with a purpose. And this parable has a couple of clues. It gives us a little bit of an insight into what he's actually trying to say. I want to go over it really quick here. So Jesus says, there's a certain rich man who was splendidly clothed in purple and fine linen, who lived each day in luxury. At his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, who was covered with sores. We're going to pause here. So a rich man in purple, so probably some kind of royalty at this point, and he has so much money that he has gates at his house. So he has gates, which means he has walls, which means he's protecting what he has, which means that he needs guards to protect what he has, correct? So this rich man has gates, which has guards. And yet there's a poor man named Lazarus laying at his gates, and he has sores. What is a sore? What are these sores? They're going to be leprosy. Why is a leper not banished to the leper community? That's what legally, if you came down with leprosy, you could not stay in the community. You could not be around people. You had to leave your family, your friends, your house, everything, and go live in seclusion in caves out in the wilderness. So what's this? If this guy's got guards, why is Lazarus, a man with leprosy, laying at his gate? So here we see that this man is actually, the rich man is practicing kindness. He's letting a man with leprosy lay at his gate instead of being banished off to the leper community. So he's practicing a kindness. He's letting him stay at the gate. He's letting him lay there, even though he has leprosy. So immediately in people's minds, as they're hearing this story unfold, they're like, wow, what a nice guy. He's a really nice rich guy. So the rich man is perceived by this context, these people hearing this, he's perceived as being blessed by God. Because you got riches, you're obviously blessed. And the poor are obviously not blessed by God, so they're cursed by God. That was a dichotomy that existed in the minds of the hearers of this story. And it's when they say, wow, he's letting a leper, and they're like, he is a really nice guy. That's not so bad. And then Jesus flips the tables and he says, finally, the poor man died and was carried by the angels to sit beside Abraham at a heavenly banquet. And everyone's like, whoa, wait a second. That's not what I expected to happen. And then Jesus carries it further. And the rich man also died and was buried. And he went to the place of the dead. And there in torment, he saw Abraham in the far distance with Lazarus by his side. Automatically, everyone hearing this story is like, you just reversed what I thought was going to happen, Jesus. You're messing with my brain. What in the world? The kind rich man blessed by God is now in this place called Sheol, the place of the dead, of darkness. What's going on? And the person who was obviously cursed by God because he's got leprosy and he's poor and dogs are licking his wounds, this person's obviously not blessed by God, but he ends up like in this place of goodness. What? Everyone is confused at this point, hearing this story. And the rich man shouted, Father Abraham, have some pity. Send Lazarus over here to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue. I am in anguish in these flames. So he wants Lazarus to get up and serve him. That's important. Hang on to that one. But Abraham says, can't do that. It's not going to happen. So then the rich man says, okay, well then could you send Lazarus to my father's house, because I have 5 brothers and I want him to warn them so they don't end up in the same place that I'm at. 5 brothers. Why would he mention 5? Now Jesus is a storyteller here, right? So he can use the details he wants to use. He's making up the story as it goes. And I don't believe the Bible communicates details without a purpose. So what is the number 5 all about? Well, if you add the man himself, how many brothers are in this family? 6, correct? Now, if I am a good Hebrew, I know that numbers mean something because numbers are letters and it's confusing, but numbers also mean something. So the number 6 to a Hebrew means incompletion, imperfection. So here he says, my house, my table, my family, and my brothers, we're all gathered around this table here. There's 6 of us. And everyone's like, I think I know where Jesus is going with this. 6 is the number of incompletion. But if he would have invited Lazarus from his gate to his table, how many would be there? 7. What does 7 mean to a good Hebrew person? The number of completion, the number of perfection. Jesus' point with this parable is not to communicate the afterlife and who goes where and how they get there. Jesus' point with this parable is to say that this rich man's kindness did not go far enough because it did not extend the offer to the table to Lazarus who lay at the gate, and his table was incomplete. His table is incomplete. His community is not complete without the inclusion of the poor and the vulnerable and the widows and the orphans and the foreigners and the wanderers. It says, I have 5 brothers, so even in this place, he still thinks of Lazarus as less than him. Send him to be a servant to me. Send him to be a messenger boy to my real family, to the people who are really my brothers. And the hearers of this story would have said, I didn't see that coming. The rich man's kindness did not go far enough to extend the call to sit at the table with him to Lazarus. And Abraham's response is, your brothers, they've read Moses and the prophets, so they can just read them. I'm not sending Lazarus as a messenger boy to your brothers. They can just read what I wrote in the prophets. What did Jesus communicate in the prophets? I want to read to you Isaiah 58, a prophet. This is the kind of religion I want. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you. Let the oppressed go free and remove the chains that bind people. Share your food with the hungry and give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them, and do not hide from relatives who need your help. Then your salvation will come like the dawn, and your wounds will quickly heal. Your godliness will lead you forward, and the glory of the Lord will protect you from behind. Then, when you call, the Lord will quickly answer, I am here, and he will quickly reply. You see, there is no them. There is us. And we're in this thing called life and humanity together. And we're to draw those back home, back to the places of safety, back into this thing called church, Jesus, the community of God. We're to draw people, not from an us to the them mentality, but from an us mentality. Because we can look out at the people who are wandering spiritually, the people who are poor and vulnerable, the people who are defenseless. We can look out at them and not from a higher place invite them into where they can get some help, but invite them into a community as a brother or sister. See, kindness is to be shown to all within our reach. Because we're all in the same boat. There is no us, there is no them. I love what Michael Gungor put in one of his songs. He says, we reject the either or. They can't define us anymore, because if it's us or them, then it's going to have to be us for them. There is no them. There is only an us. And we're to draw people back. Now, how can you actually do that this week? You can draw people back with kindness, because Thrive is a pretty cool place, right? Yeah. This is like a really cool place. I love it. So I'm going to invite John up here, and he's going to give a few closing things. But next week is Easter. It's like a big deal, y'all. This is a big deal. And has everyone ever been to an Easter at Thrive where it's just kind of like, meh? No, we don't do that. So a kindness that we can offer somebody, sharing our faith with somebody, is grabbing some of these door hangers, grabbing some of these postcards, grabbing some of these business cards, and inviting friends and family here next week. It's a kindness. It's a way that we can invite people into an all-inclusive community of loving people with God as its primary sustainer and most glorious inhabitant.
Not to mention, so the experience is going to be great, but if you show up hungry with your friends and your family, we've got that covered too, because next Sunday before Easter experience, we've got pancakes and sausage for anybody and everybody that shows up.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. So grab these things on your way out. Invite people as a kindness to invite them back home. Be a light this week. It just takes handing out a card. They're not going to say no. They might say maybe and not show up. They might say yes and not show up, but usually they're not going to say no, right?
That's true. That's true.
They're going to come.
Also, on your way out, so if you notice over here on this half wall, there are tiny stacks of cards. So Sunday, a week from today is Easter, and that's an incredible day. A week from this Thursday, we have an opportunity as a church to do something phenomenal. We get to drive 360 pairs of brand new shoes up to Harrison, where we get to give them to elementary school students who many of them have never had a new pair of shoes before, and all that because of your generosity as a church. And that's awesome. Can we just celebrate that for a minute? That's incredible. That's incredible. People wonder, like where is Jesus today? Where's Jesus? Jesus is running around in Harrison without shoes. That's where he is. And we get a chance to meet that need. So on your way out, there are these cards. And real quick, on the back, they're blank. And we want to make sure that every pair of shoes we give out gets a handwritten note with it. Mm-hmm. Something that tells these kids, like, hey, this didn't just come from, this came from somebody. This came from a person that has a personal touch to it. And so as you write them, there's pens to just fill it out real quick, to write a real quick message. Make the messages as generic as possible, because we don't know, could go to a boy or a girl. Sizes could be camouflage. Who knows? They gave us, Adidas gave us quite a variety.
Nice.
So they're pretty awesome. So also be on the lookout for social media, because those pictures are going to blow up. But anyway, so stop by that half wall, fill out a note, and then also on your way out, there's sign-ups for the Restoration House because the week after Easter, Thrive is going to be serving and volunteering with that. And so we're particularly looking for night hosts and overnight guest supervisors. I forget the term, but overnight shift for that. And so check out that on your way out, and that'll be great as well. And I think, and then if you haven't given you didn't put your Connect card in the baskets that were passed, we'll have some baskets on your way out. Just go ahead and drop that out, and we'll get you plugged in from there.
Yeah, so I think we have wrapped this up. The Red Beard Patrol closing out. That was the
facial hair back on.
Facial hair is back.
Jason tries, but he's more of a songwriter. We're more beard growers. That's our gift.
That's the spiritual gift of beard growing. Well, you guys, we will see you next week. We will see you for Easter Sunday. Make sure to bring somebody and take some of these hangers on your way out. Fill out a card. See you next week.